right. Good evening, everybody. It is 7:07 on April 21st, and I will call to order this meeting of the Planning Commission. Madam Secretary, may I have a roll call, please?
Yes. So Commissioner Hillman, Chair Hillman,
Present.
Commissioner Nordmo,
Present.
Commissioner Brewer,
Present.
Commissioner Abraham,
Present.
Commissioner Robinson,
Present.
Commissioner Clark.
Commissioner Clark has notified us of her absence. Oh, I'm sorry. Madam Clerk.
Commissioner
we-
Hammond.
No, sorry about that. A few notes on the topic of roll call. Commissioner Clark has notified us that she will be absent this evening. As many of us know, she's a college student, and this is final season. So I'll take a motion to approve her absence, please.
I make the motion.
Support.
The motion to approve Clark's absence has been made and supported. All in favor?
Aye.
All opposed? Hearing none, we will excuse Clark's absence. I'd also like to take this opportunity to formally welcome a new commissioner to our presence, Roy Brewer. This is his first meeting, so I welcome you, and the community does as well. Thank you for agreeing to serve in this capacity. I hope you enjoy it. Lastly, on the topic of attendance, I missed my first meeting ever last month, so I would like to extend appreciation to everybody up here for filling in my absence, and particularly to you, Co-Chair Robinson, for your good effort and hard work and last minute agreement to chair last month's meeting. So thank you. I really appreciate it. Moving on to agenda item 3, approval of the agenda. Does all members of this commission have an agenda in front of them and have had time to review it? Very good. With that, I'll take a motion to approve the agenda, please.
So moved.
Support.
I hear a motion to approve the agenda with support from Commissioner Nordmo. All in favor?
Aye.
All opposed? Hearing no opposition, we will approve the agenda. Agenda item 4, approval of meeting minutes. Is everybody in possession of, and has everybody been able to review the meeting minutes from our March 2026 meeting? Seems like we have. I'll take a motion to approve those meeting minutes.
I make the motion to approve the meeting minutes.
Support.
Motion to approve our March 2026 meeting minutes has been made and supported. All in favor?
Aye.
All opposed? Hearing none, we will approve the meeting minutes from our March 2026 meeting. All right, got all the housekeeping out of the way. Agenda item 5, public comment. Of course, the topic of today's meeting, at least the primary topic, will be Pledge of Allegiance. Thank you. I'm going to take a quick detour. Pledge of Allegiance was not on the agenda, so I forgot to call it. But if you would be inclined to and are able to, please join us in the recitation of Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge
Allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. I was waiting.
Sorry about that. I'm very true to the agenda, and it's not on here. And I just got done congratulating you for such a good job at the last meeting. So thank you again for filling in when needed at this one. Agenda item 5, public comment. As I was saying, the primary purpose for today's meeting is to review the economic development section of our master plan. However, as many of you in the audience were present for, we did have a discussion in our study session on the topic of transportation. So should you have any public comments on the topic of transportation or the economic development discussion, please feel free to use this 3 minutes to do so, keeping in mind that you'll have an additional opportunity for public comment when we move on to section 8 of the agenda. In advance of your public comment, please, if you would, state your name for the record. I'd appreciate that.
Okay,
Very closer.
all right. Well, mine are going to be questions because I haven't finished my Constitution article and it's got to be in by midnight.
Sure.
So,
And we know you, but please state your name.
yes, Diane Anderson, And I have a series of questions that I would like members of the Planning Commission to address that have to do with economic development and the kind of role that Giffords-Webster has been playing. We used to have a sign when you came into town that said, "A heritage of good living." And that was taken down for no reason, and it now says, "Welcome home to any town, USA." So my questions are the following, and don't bother taking the notes. I'll send them to you tomorrow because my writing's so bad. First of all, I would like to know, the city of Birmingham was 3 cities in one in the 40s, 50s, 60s, 70s, 80s, until the 90s. It had an affluent area by Corton Lake. It had an area not so affluent on the east side of Woodward, between 14 and 15, particularly Lincoln and 15. And then it had the area that was mostly like Lathrup. And that's why, right through until the 90s, Lathrup was always paired with Birmingham. That's how it happened. So I'd like to know, first of all, why Giffords-Webster always seems to seek Lathrup, not associated with Birmingham, but if you look at this document for tonight, it's Oak Park, it's Royal Oak Township. These aren't the kind of places we were ever linked up to. Why are you doing that? Why have you tried to break the link with upmarket Birmingham when in 1960 at Wayne State University, when Mom completed her degree, we were called the Grosse Pointe of the West? My second question has to do with the fact that Giffords-Webster kept referring to the school as the old high school. It was never high school, it was an elementary school. That's why it was the beating heart, so we didn't have helicopter parenting. That was also our play area as well as a school. And my question, were you people deliberately misled by thinking it was a high school and therefore you didn't understand all the feeling those of us who love the place and care about an independent childhood have? Or were they just ignorant? I'd like to know. I'd also like to know how many times you people have been advised by Giffords-Webster to work with Preservation Michigan to get funding to maintain the architectural heritage of our historic commercial buildings and to have them repurposed inside with the kind of places that used to be there, white-collar businesses that closed down for a bedroom community. So how many times has that happened? How many times have you been apprised of that as counselors? And finally, I'd like to know why Giffords-Webster, and you have agreed to it, have brought in the kind of businesses that were never allowed before. A laundrette that's open till 11 o'clock. Even Birmingham is only 7 to 7, and who needs a laundrette in a 1.5 square mile building? Bedroom community. Why did they bring in smelly, dirty restaurants so the people that live behind them are really second-class citizens? Why has this two-tiered citizenship been continued?
Thank you, Diane. Anybody else?
John Suzanis, Rainbow Drive. These are comments about the study session. First of all, I would like to thank the Road Commission for coming in, and TJ did give us a lot of information, but I have to say, as a representative of the city and as a resident, I was underwhelmed by the presentation, as I was when I was sitting on council for the first Road Commission presentation. I think over and over again what we see is there's an idea, but the path from here to that idea is never clear. The commissioners asked questions that I felt never got a real answer, which is how do you get from point A to point B, and what would the timing be? And so from my perspective, when the council voted, at least my vote, was as much against, much about fiscal things as it was about what is the dream here, what is the plan, and how can we put ourselves on the line for money that we've not identified in any way, how we would pay our portion of it. The other part of that is they were talking about building the south section first and then the north section, leaving us in between two places for decades. So my takeaway from all of that is just that when the Planning Commission and Giffords-Webster look at the master plan, I don't think we should be taking this mythical boulevard into account. It might be a good idea, it might not, but it's not happening, as we found out tonight, until at least 2041. And that would be if all the things fell in line. So when we think about safety, when we think about what we want, when we think about how we're going to build our new businesses, et cetera, if we plan around something that's not going to happen, we're not going to get the best available plan. So I would really like this commission to take that into consideration as they think about those things. I think that's all I have to say. Thanks.
Thanks, John. Any other members of the public here to comment? Very good. Keep in mind, there will be another opportunity for public comment as we move through the agenda, so you'll have another shot. Moving along to agenda item 6, old business and tabled items. Austin, I'm not sure there are
No, we
any
have
old
none
business or
tonight.
tabled items?
None tonight.
Okay. Anything I'm missing from anybody up here on the dais? Very good. We'll move on. Agenda item 7, new business A, council input master plan update. Of course, we've already heard from one member of council, Councilman Suzanis just spoke during public comment. I also wasn't present at our last meeting where I know this was an agenda item as well. So could you kick this off and
Yeah,
perhaps
there's an
indicate-
opportunity here. We've been asked by council to have an agenda item where members can come and speak with the planning commission. So this is an opportunity for any members of city council to come and address the council or commission.
Is that the right place to do
Yes.
Well, now I'll speak as a council. I guess I mixed it up a little bit there. One of the things that I heard said today and got a little bit of confirmation is something that I've addressed in the past, and I just want to emphasize it. And that is, there is no technical difference between a redo and an update of the master plan. There might be a difference in how we budget for it, I understand that. But because there's no technical difference, there's no way to say, well, we're only going to look at X, Y, or Z. What we're gonna do is look at what the community needs and wants right now. And the definition of whether we've done a complete redo or an update will be a result not of intent, but of what the people say they want and how different the plan is. So I understand there's a limit on the budget, and especially in terms of Giffords-Webster, but in terms of our community, we're looking at each of these items holistically, and that might, when it's all done, be a redo. And I don't think we should get stuck on that, well, this time is only this, because there's no way to define that parameter. So I just wanted to reiterate it, not to lecture you, but it's something that we talked about, and it's felt like it came out today in the study session. That's probably my biggest thing today. I didn't actually understand that the council had a spot on this agenda today. And Jason, did you know that going in? All right, well, I wish the other council members were here as well.
So this was introduced, the first time we implemented this in the agenda was the last planning commission meeting.
Yeah, and I do remember that one, because
And it was a
it came to
response
that one.
from,
yeah. Okay,
specifically
that's
from a
good.
request from you and the mayor to create this opportunity.
Well,
So
I
I think
do
this is gonna be on the
appreciate
agenda
it.
going forward.
Yeah,
once we get the
That was
plan.
my understanding.
That's the
It was
extent.
asked.
Good,
today.
yeah, no, I know we asked for it, I guess I missed the part where it actually got scheduled into the meeting in this way. I appreciate that part, I appreciate that from the commission, making room for us on this. I wish more commissioners, or more council members were here to take advantage of that today. I'm going to listen, and then possibly use public comment to give the majority of my comments tonight. So I think, yeah, that, and then, Jason, you're here, so you can.
I do have one thing
Yeah.
to say. My perspective about, one of the major things in the master plan that feels like it needs updating is this concept of a village center district. So when the master plan was originally established in
2021?
20, no.
Or the one with the village
original
center?
one. Yeah,
Oh, that was,
Eric, was it 2014?
2014.
Village Center?
yeah.
The Village Center is 2009.
I was gonna
2009.
say, I thought Jill said that was
Okay.
09.
2009, when we first established, redevelopment ready community certified and that was all part of that process. There was this aspirational idea of a village center district added to the master plan with the idea that we would establish this vision and that that vision could be used to influence ordinances that the planning commission and the city council would implement in order to encourage the types of businesses and investment in the city that would, both from the city and from private entities, that would create this village center idea and bring a concept from an idea to reality. And the investment just hasn't been there. So this came up a lot, and especially during review of plans relative to the proposed redevelopment of the Annie Lathrup School, that, the rules and the ordinances are designed to support this type of investment, and things like, 0-foot setbacks from the street, and there's lots of other examples around that. But I think what I heard, and one of the takeaways I took from public comments during all of those meetings, is that because there hasn't been an investment to bring this village center district concept to reality, there needs to be an update to the master plan, and the city can't just point to the master plan as it is and use that as the excuse to not implement what the public is telling the planning commission and the city council they want to see in the city. So I just ask the commissioners to keep that in mind as we're talking both about economic development and housing, which will be on the agenda in a future meeting, to keep that in mind, that we really need to focus on this description of what the village center district is described as in the master plan, and think about how do we, what adjustments maybe need to be made to that description to be more in line with both reality and public sentiment.
Any discussion among the commission?
I have a comment. I've heard several references so far of how we're expected to take the community input around the plan and integrate it into our discussions, and then come up with a draft for review by the community at large. And I also understand that there's been a lot of community input, and that we'll get it at the end of May. And the plan is due, and then the community is going to have a big meeting to see the new plan in when?
So in June, we plan on having an open house, and that will be kind of just a look back and a recollection of this entire engagement process. But that's kind of when we transition over from the engagement process to looking at plan drafting. But the plan itself won't be finalized and adopted until early next year. So this meeting, this town hall, if you will, in June is more just to say, this is what we heard, and that's kind of why it's timed to end in May, and then we're going to provide all of that data. So that's kind of where we're at. Does that answer your question?
Well, sort of, but we'll say it's what we heard a week or two ago and never got around to discussing because it's been held private from us. We're not seeing it as it comes in. You have 200 comments on this and 100 on something else and so on, and that's all in a box somewhere. We're not seeing any of that. I just want public to know that. I'm not real happy about how that relates to the planning process.
Right now, we're at a phase where we're still early on. We're still in the first half. We're going through each of the chapters of the 2021 plan, which we all know that there was not much feedback because of COVID and lockdown. There was not the opportunity to interface with one another and actually advertise the surveys. So we got economic development tonight. Next month, we're going to have Parks and Rec, and you guys will also be at the Parks and Rec meeting. And then at that point, we'll have done our review of the major sections of the master plan. And then in June, Hannah and Giffords Webster will be here so that we can have a open house. We'll release that information, present it to you guys, and then I'm sure there'll be an opportunity for public comment at that time. And then we'll continue having these meetings every month when we meet, and we'll discuss at that point the analysis. So now that we did the review of where we're at, the base of the plan, we'll go pivot to the next process, the next phase of the update, where we actually review the data and kind of see what direction the public wants to go and where do they want to go.
So we're not going to hear any publicity around the June meeting as though it's some kind of rollout or some kind of presentation of a draft.
No.
Because
imagine the June meeting is, this is what we've heard. Did we get this right? Are we correct in our assessment of what you all have said?
No, we won't be there for that because we haven't had a single meeting to discuss what, by that time, we will not have had a single meeting to discuss what their input is.
Well, it's an open house, and we hope that all of you are able to attend. That was something we were going to talk tonight about, the date that works best for each one of you. And we were going to try to make sure that as many of you as possible could attend. And when that data got out, we could then, or was released, we could then talk. And then at our July meeting, we would begin the discussion of exactly what was it that the public told us? What is it that they would like to see? And then at that point, that will reflect on exactly what direction the master plan update goes.
Can I, bear with me for a second while I figure out how to ask this. So, in advance of this conversation, I think I was under the impression that this open house would be some type of presentation of findings, which I think I share Commissioner Norbo's concern in that I don't feel like I personally would be positioned to present any findings because we don't have the data, let alone the time to analyze it or draw
No,
conclusions
it's
from it.
not that we're expecting you guys to present anything. It's the actual survey results that we'll be reviewing.
So it's
So-
a presentation of results and
And no
discussion
conclusion.
thereof. Okay. Commissioner Nordmo, does it make you feel any better to know that the commission will not be present for that meeting in the capacity of presenting a
It
draft
is-
or presenting an analysis of data we haven't yet reviewed?
Just so it's clear to the public, they're not coming to see the plan, they're coming to see their comments to the plan and various other people's comments. But, but we are not going to be in a position at that point to say, we hear what you're saying, because we haven't even had, we just barely got to read it. And we haven't had a chance to talk it over with each other. That's what the real status will be. So it's a matter of how it's presented and promoted. This is not a meeting about the draft new plan. It's just a meeting about the processing and
That's correct.
some of the things that have been said about the plan.
Yes, sir. So just if I may, when we had the kickoff in October for the master plan process, the first part of the process is to gather information and gather data, to survey the community, to have a general understanding of what some of the tone is on these topics, such as last month's transportation topic, this month's discussion on economic development. So what the open house is intended to do is at the end of all of those processes and those different topics of conversation is to have an open house as more or less like an end cap to that whole process that will allow for the public to come and to look at the data that we've collected and to offer any more commentary, additional commentary. It gives them the opportunity that if they haven't been heard during this whole process, that they'll have an opportunity for us to capture additional comments in discussion. So it's an open house, again, as more or less like an end cap of the data gathering process. And so from that point forward, come June, is when we will start analyzing the data and start considering drafting language and changes based on the information that we've gathered from October to June of this year.
I understand.
If I can, because one of the things I requested, or, council requested that we got was to be included in these meetings. The other, though, that I thought came to the surface at the last meeting that I was at, and I'm asking for again, is a clearer schematic that you can share of your entire process, because I think misunderstanding of what stage we're at has been a problem from the beginning, and it seems like it continues. If we could sort of have that schematic with sort of the definition of what each step is, I think that would go a long way towards getting people into the process and also being a little less defensive about it, or at least from my point of view.
Yeah, understood.
If that's something they could provide.
Sure. This discussion alone has provided me personally some clarity, and I don't mean to repeat myself, but I think I wholly misunderstood the intention of the open house until we've had this discussion now. So I appreciate you, Commissioner Nordmo, for bringing it up, and I appreciate the commentary from the table in front of us to provide that clarity. As a few comments to some other things that were brought up in this part of our discussion. I believe it was at our March meeting, at which I was not present, that Councilman Suzanis also floated the idea of a joint session between council and the Planning Commission. Now, we started this process as a very collective group effort with not only this commission, council, but also representatives from things like the Tree Committee and the DDA and other bodies that represent the city in different capacities. I think perhaps as part of this open house exercise, or perhaps even as an additional exercise to it, I would also agree that the coming together, the reunification of those of us who sit on boards, committees, councils, commissions, et cetera, seems like a good idea. And it doesn't have to be decided upon now, but if this group could give some thought to where that might fit in the process, I think it would be great. Obviously, Councilman Suzanis has been here several times. Commissioner Hammond is also Councilman Hammond, so he's there all the time. Mayor Cantor has been present at these meetings often, but there's other people of council that have not been present at these meetings since the initial one, and I would like to reunite with them as well as others and bodies like the DDA, et cetera. Any other commentary? Yeah.
Yeah, I have a question. When the survey was decided to be one of the methods of communication, what was the expectation about the response rate? How many residents are we? And then, you know, where we've gotten thus far seems to be pretty low.
Can I answer that?
Yeah.
So, talking with colleagues in Oakland County at the Main Street Oakland County Conference last month, Farmington, a city that's 12,000 residents, they just did their master plan process. They had less than 100 respondents. We have 4,000. We've had, what, 200 plus, almost 300?
Yeah.
So we're already kind of dwarfing them in just by percentage alone. But ultimately, what we're seeing, yes, 300 in without context is a low number, all things considered, when you compare it to the 4,000 residents. But comparatively speaking, with master plan processes, residents generally don't get involved with that, and this is a worldwide thing. I could tell you from working, maybe not working, but being in and around municipal government all my life, it is very hard to get residents out for these things. So 300 residents, I'm over the moon about. I do wish we got more, but I'm also understanding the context of it. We're just not gonna get everybody.
And in the 2021 comprehensive update, the update was based off of 66 respondents.
2014, it was 75 responses.
Yeah.
So you're light years
Well-
ahead of where you were
If I,
previous iterations.
Well, while I appreciate the statistics, they're all pretty glum. I'd like to compare us to some higher numbers.
I
And so
understand.
what I'd like to be comfortable though with is that we can identify what methods we tried to get more participation. Because I think when you present this to the public, we should be careful about saying it's a representation of their views. We should be clear about how many this totally represented, so that it has some credibility.
And that's clear in all of the master plans that have been done. The survey response rate is included in the final draft.
if I may add to that as well, you know, sharing that thought that it's nice to have more people. Part of what we're doing through this process is doing that tracking. Last month, we had showed kind of a graphic that showed that we were getting a little bit of a lower response rate than what we would expect for the population in the southern neighborhoods. And we are right now keeping track of those numbers on all of the demographic questions that we've asked in this survey. So to that end, knowing where did we come out weak in this process, where did we come out strong, what can we do different next time, knowing that it's, you know, you strive for perfect, but try to just get better every time you do it. And I do think that the numbers are, you know, significantly higher this time, but that doesn't mean we should stop. And I think that with the new Committee for Engagement and Communication, they're also doing a lot of work, and I think the goal is really to have as many different forms of participation, so that's kind of the approach we've taken this time. You know, we've got flyers, we've got online, we've got in person, we've got games, and open house coming up,
We
you
got
know.
business cards.
We've got business cards.
And last week Hannah did reach out to me and she told me that the south east quadrant, the response rate is low. So we're in the process of having yard signs created so that we can put them up in the intersections of that, where it meets 11 Mile and also Southfield, so that residents in that area know that the master plan is going on. There are people who have so many responsibilities in their life, and they're so overwhelmed with things that they don't have time to really look around and see what is going on social media, or come into City Hall and see a poster, or listen to a public meeting and hear that there's a master plan update under. So we gotta meet people where they're at. So we're trying, and we're trying different ways to communicate with people, and we hope all of you are telling your neighbors and telling people to come on out, because we want more feedback. We need more feedback.
Yeah, and
Do we have the ability to post something like on the downstairs board where the other announcements are with maybe a QR code? That if someone came in to pay their bill, they could,
We have.
It is down
notice
there.
it's there?
Yep, it's down there now. We've sent the business cards down there. We've had posters, and our clerical staff downstairs have also been letting people know as well on our behalf.
And during our tree committee meeting earlier tonight, one of our chair of the committee, he did a survey and got 66 responses. So we started picking his brain. All right, well, what did you do to get that feedback? So we've shared him the digital flyer, and they're posting it around on their network of residents. So we're trying to meet people where they're at, because people are busy and they don't have time to be here like all of us do. So we want to make sure that everybody has an opportunity to give us feedback, and we tried to make the surveys concise so people felt that they could work through it quickly. It wasn't burdensome. And we want to make sure that people are heard and felt like they're heard as well.
I appreciate the great effort the city's taken to provide multiple opportunities for input, whether it's via the homepage or a business card or flyers posted around town. I think all of this reminds me that we also have another trick up our sleeve, which I've already mentioned, which is the gathering of residents who are already inclined to participate in things like this. When we met at the beginning of the master plan process, I don't know what the head count was in the room downstairs, but it was populated. It was a good turnout, and it was a good turnout on relatively short notice to members of the community. So I would really encourage us to take seriously another opportunity like that one, to gather folks from this commission, council, tree committee, and otherwise.
DDA.
Sure, to a direct invitation to those bodies to re-engage at another point
I
in the
think that's a good
process.
idea. I like it.
Yes.
If I may, we have a citywide, what is it?
Newsletter?
A citywide yard sale.
Oh, the
coming
yard
up.
sale, yes.
Is it possible to slap a QR code down on the bottom of the yard sale signs? Just saying.
That's a good idea.
My concern for that would just be that if people saw the QR code on the sign about the yard sale, they would think that that's
Oh,
a
yeah,
QR code
redirect it.
for the yard
Yeah.
sale specifically. So
Yeah,
not out of the realm of possibility, but also context is everything.
yeah,
Could put
The
yard sign
signs,
next to
yeah,
that
we could do
yard
that,
sign,
yeah.
absolutely.
yeah. And then my other comment is, Councilman Susanna's, the swim lanes, you were saying that it would be nice to see a timeline. I would agree with that. If we had something with swim lanes that said, here's the planning phase, here's the discovery phase, that just broke it out. And I think maybe you had that already?
Here, I
Yeah.
can,
And maybe yep,
this
there you
is
go.
of the spring's timeline.
Yep.
Yeah.
Yeah, and to further detail that, so we have been presenting this timeline each month and kind of just moving it along like you noted. But on the website as well, there is another timeline on the side that kind of talks a little bit more about like we went in this visioning phase and now we're in this engagement and data phase, and then after that it's plan drafting, and that kind of really involves more of the conversations about what we heard and how we're moving forward. But an actual fully realized plan document doesn't happen until late this year or even early next year, so.
So I think if you're able to take a look at that and maybe add any questions or concerns or, something that you would like them to expound on, that might be helpful too. So.
Yeah, and connecting the dots between those dots and the fact that like tonight is a meeting. Like you sort of have to jump from this chart over to the calendar and realize, oh, this must be that, and then, you know what I'm saying, as opposed to trying to give people a real sense of, oh, we're talking about economic development on April 21st, but it's only a initial phase, and we're not deciding anything. I think we got good turnout at the housing one because everyone was really worried that we were going to decide housing policy at that meeting. Not as good as I'd like, but so I don't know.
Yeah, it's kind of like what Jerry Ann's going through right now, where
Yeah.
she has a textbook and she goes and she reads each chapter, and then at the end she puts it all together in her finals. So right now we're still studying. We haven't
Well-
even gotten to midterms yet.
I was looking at the website today, and this is up there. And then there's another one with some more categories and empty circles and no reference to date. So it's not clear whether it's the end of the summer, the end of the year, or sometime next spring.
Yeah, we can get a flow chart put together that's very concise and very very detailed, so that we can make sure that everybody is on the same page. So that also we can make sure that these meetings move along and everybody knows what's expected of them when they come. So yeah, we'll get that put together and sent out to you guys as soon as we get it finalized. But we do have a presentation regarding economic development for you all.
Any other discussion on this topic? Very briefly, I do think that because next month's meeting is on the final topic of Parks and Recreation, it would be a good idea for us to review perhaps like a draft invitation for this open house so that we can come to an agreement on what it is actually that we're presenting to the public, what the nature of this event actually is, and come to an agreement on if we agree with the way that that invitation is presented. Does that
Sure.
make sense?
That does make sense, absolutely.
Okay, appreciate that. All right, moving along to 7 new business B, master plan update, economic development discussion.
As soon as we can get through technical difficulties, we will bring this message to you.
So Hannah and Eric put together a presentation regarding the economic development section of the master plan from 2021. And during that, we thought it was a good idea to also update you guys on our recast city efforts with Alana Pruse. And we actually have one of our cohort members in resident and DDA member, Tracy Williams, here as well. So once we're able to get the presentation up, Giffords and Webster will present the current section on economic development, and we will then go into exactly the recast part, but it's been a fantastic experience working with Alana. She is somebody who really cares about communities across the country. She's worked with communities in every state, and she's brought in the concept of small-scale production, not as a replacement of the local economy, but as an addition. It's additional economic development tool. It's also additional capacity that property owners can utilize, and it also attracts a different type of investor. And there's a lot of interesting things that come along with it. Like I said, it's not a win-all economic development strategy. It's just one tool in an arsenal of many that we are trying to put together to help our downtown businesses and property owners in the district at large. You guys ready to rock and roll?
Yeah, we're ready to
All
rock
right.
and roll. Thank you for waiting. Yeah, so we already touched on this a little bit, but at the beginning of every month, I just like to kind of remind everyone where we're at. We're still in the engagement and data collecting phase. We're about halfway through, and this month we're focusing on economic development. And as Austin said, we're going to be doing a little bit of collaboration with what's happening in Recast and the city. So we wanted to just give a snapshot of where we're at for engagement, because again, we're still going to be collecting this data and feedback through the end of May. And I think as Giffords Webster, we just like to be clear that all of that, we intend to have all of that data fully available in a transparent manner. We're just collecting it right now, and we don't want to skew the results or do anything that would tamper with the data. So we just want to let it be collected, let people be heard until the end of May, at which point we will make public a full scale review and data analysis for you. I mean, not even really an analysis, but the results. So that'll be transparent and available. As far as where we're at right now, we've got 205 responses on the housing survey, 67 on the transportation survey, economic development, we're at 43, parks and rec, we're at 42, and those numbers are really just going up every day. I just updated those this afternoon because I found that when I create these PowerPoints, typically those numbers are much, they keep creeping higher, so that's looking good. We're not seeing any kind of plateauing. And more recently, in part of our effort to understand where and how we're reaching people, we have been tracking how do people visit the Hub website. And I think this will be really critical for the city going forward, even beyond this process. But we're finding that around 10% of people come from social media posts. I know that Austin's made a Facebook post, so we know that those are successful, or at least that some people are clicking that way. 24% come directly from the city website, and most of our traffic is coming through direct link, which is like our flyers or QR codes. So we know that those flyers being posted around, those business cards being passed out, that's so far the most successful avenue that we're reaching people. Now, that's not to say that we've reached everyone or that we don't need to keep trying new things, because we're definitely all for that, but we are tracking these things so we at least have some idea of how can we do better or what can we keep doing. And then, so for our presentation tonight for you, we're just going to go through a little bit of existing conditions. That's that data part. I promise I'll try to make it as fun as possible, or at least a little bit easier to digest and listen to. And then we're going to move into economic development as it has existed in Lathrup Village over the last couple master plans and what's happening now. And then kind of move into more of that goals and objectives and discussion piece. Where do we go from there? So with that, we just have some quick data here for you to kind of get an understanding of where does Lathrup Village fall in terms of economic development. And I did want to take time to answer this question too, because it's been asked a few times, but when we're sort of doing these comparisons to the county and the state of Michigan, as well as some of these other cities in the region, it's not so much to draw connections or compare Lathrup Village similarities to these other communities as much as it is to show how Lathrup Village is maybe unique or different. It's more to understand how Lathrup Village fits into the context of the greater Southeast Michigan region. We're not necessarily saying, Lathrup Village is like Oak Park and that's why we put it on there. It's to just understand where does it fall in that regional context, because planning doesn't happen in a vacuum. We travel between our neighboring cities all the time. We spend money in other cities. We work in other cities. And I think understanding, especially on an economic point, how the whole region is doing. So just kind of, I just wanted to elaborate more on that. It's not really to, it's just to kind of understand the regional context better. But that being said, the median household income for Lathrup Village, as reported on the census, is sitting right under 100,000. That's like higher or middle of the way for the region. And please feel free to stop me if you have any questions along the way. Yes.
You could see my face, couldn't you? The question I have is does that take into consideration retired versus fully employed?
So yes, it fully so the median income for the census considers all incomes for a household. And a household is different than a family. It's pretty much everybody that lives under one roof, but they may or may not be related. So that's also important to understand. And when we're looking at the median, we're also saying that half of the resident households make more than this and half make less. So it's just our middle point. Does that answer your question?
It does, but I was just hoping we could split it out between, this is what the income looks like for those persons that are retired versus those people that are actually
Absolutely.
working.
And that is a data piece, and I'm really glad you asked that, because I like collecting data, so I'm glad, we can definitely, I can take a deeper dive into that, see if we can separate out what does the retiree community look like, because we're concerned about like a fixed income situation, right?
Absolutely, and the reason I ask is because if we are looking at affordability and the ability of our retirees to remain in Lathrup Village, then we need to make sure that we're providing housing that's going to meet them where they are.
Okay. Yeah, absolutely. We can get that data and clarify, see how far we can clarify what retired residents might be making compared to the full population. And in addition to that, usually we can pull other metrics of groups who may be not retired, but living off of other fixed incomes like
Right.
disability, and kind of figuring out where those populations lie.
Sure. To the previous slide
Yeah.
and to your questions, Commissioner Robinson, I don't know that this is true or not, but conceivably, Lathrop Village could have a much higher percentage of retired residents than a city like Ferndale, which might see far more dual income, working aged residents, right? And so, of course, with a dual income, working aged resident population, the household income of Berkeley would, as presented, appear as a more affluent city than Lathrop Village, but isn't necessarily considered of things like personal wealth or nest
Right.
incomes that people are sitting on, et cetera.
Right.
So,
Yep.
and thank you for responding a little indirectly to, I think you were responding a little indirectly to one of the public comments earlier, but to put a finer point on that, I think the public commenter might say, okay, thank you, but why isn't Birmingham represented on this list? Why isn't Bloomfield represented on this list? I understand why Berkeley is, I understand why Southfield is, I understand why Huntington Woods or Pleasant Ridge are. We're very often in discussion with communities like these, but why not Bloomfield? Why not Birmingham? Why not Beverly Hills, a city with whom we almost share a border? Would the response from Giffords be that this is just a random kind of diverse sampling? Is that the only motivation?
It's traditionally been just the surrounding communities, so there really is no, there's not too much thought put behind, well, if we're gonna choose the surrounding communities, why aren't we choosing the next ring out, so to speak? So there's no underlying intent, that, it's just essentially the surrounding communities to just give that snapshot of immediate, vicinity. So it's understood why you'd ask about other communities, and so we can certainly include those, but this is just to create a snapshot for how does Lathrop Village fit amongst the peers of the immediate vicinity, so.
I think to speak to that a little bit as well, kind of diving deeper into my own comment is, the intention is to both pull cities that are different from Lathrop and also cities that are common, so, or maybe share more commonalities, as you may think, or, have kind of a historical significance to each other. And so really we kind of try to choose a little bit of everything to get this profile, but whether it may or may not have included Birmingham as opposed to Berkeley, it might have just been because we chose Berkeley as opposed to Birmingham as more of the similar, but if you would like Birmingham added, that's something we can definitely do. We're open to adding or excluding any, but again, it's just more of just like that full profile, looking at what's different, what's similar, and we generally try to stick to or choose around 10 comparisons, because when you start to pick more than that, it kind of gets lost in the weeds, or it gets, harder to keep track of. But again, like some of those substitutions, and it depends on what you're studying too. There are things that you would want to look at more comparative data, and things you'd want to look at different data. So because this is a very generalized plan that includes a lot of topics, we're doing both.
To that point, Detroit couldn't be more different from Lathrop Village.
Yes.
If you're gonna consider replacing something on this list, just to keep the numbers right, that's probably a good target, because I don't know what the value is if we're looking at the data about Detroit.
Yes.
I have no idea why it's in here.
So I can speak more to that. Like Detroit is kind of your anchoring large metropolitan city in this area, right? So everything around this area kind of stems from Detroit and goes outward, each city having its own characteristics and completely different history and makeup, but using your closest large metropolitan area as kind of a base point and talking about how that differs from its suburbs can really help get the picture of where Lathrop Village falls in that geographical context. Does that answer a
It
little
answers
bit
the
more?
question. I don't know if I agree with you, but you would know more about this than I do. I mean, you're educated in this space. I am not, so.
If we're on the west side of the state, we'd be using Grand Rapids. If we were up north, we'd be using either Gaylord or
But why?
Traverse City, so.
I mean, I understand you just
Anchor
answered that
communities.
question, why?
I mean,
I'm
Because we're a
just not sure.
metropolitan city of Detroit.
Yeah,
I get it.
yeah.
I'm having trouble on identifying the value to me as a planning commissioner and understanding these specific numbers relative to
To
economic
understand what
development.
what communities want, you need to look at cities that are in the surrounding area in the region. And those compare cities that are very similar and also cities that are not very similar. And those show different aspects of life in those cities. So you need to look at what's similar and also what's not to get a better holistic view of exactly what's going on in the region.
So I'm also kind of having trouble understanding in a certain way how this presented data is supposed to help me make decisions at all. Like what is, obviously it's money, it's income, but how am I supposed to use this data to make good decisions or good recommendations or anything related to?
Well, how often do you look at this data?
I don't have access to this until it was sent to me, so.
That's why we wanted to talk about it. Most people don't look at the median household income in surrounding communities, so it's to give you an understanding. So when the time comes that we do have the survey results, that you guys can make the best informed decision possible.
I'm just trying to understand the connection between this type of information and the type of decisions that I'm gonna be expected to weigh in on, because I am new. Right, I frankly don't exactly understand what the relation is.
You are
I'm
handicapped because you're coming into the process in the middle.
I am, and I'm sorry about that.
That's not your fault. But it's just a fact.
Okay, I can leave it then, thanks.
Maybe a different way of looking at it is that this information, again, the master plan is a document that is out there for developers to look at, look when they're assessing where, if they want to locate their operations within a community. This provides that developer with a snapshot of the region for comparison. So there really is nothing that this body or city council will have to make a decision on based upon the average household income or the median household income. That's,
So I can see how a developer would care about this
yeah, it's,
information.
and that's, again, that's what, this document is a guiding policy document for not only the city, this body, the city council, when, they can reference, you make it a development project in the future, and you can say, all right, is that consistent with our master plan? Is this way out in left field, something we've never even contemplated before? How does this fit with within the vision of the city? It's also a tool for developers so that they can look and say, all right, I've got this crazy idea for this new business development. I'm looking for a place to put it. Where is it gonna work? And then they can look at various communities' master plans and they can see, all right, Lathrop Village, they're an affluent community. They have, currently they've got this desire to have a village center. It's great. My idea is to put a village center type of a development. This might be a good place for me to locate. And so it's going to be used as a tool, again, not only for guiding policy decisions within the city, but largely for outside developers to look and see what they can and expect. Because, as a developer coming in, if you're asking for something that is completely outside, you're going to need multiple zoning variances in order to make your project come to fruition. You're probably going to look at an alternative location, somewhere where it's going to be easier to get to your desired objective without having to, move or change ordinances. So that's, again, this data is largely relevant to this body and city council. It's more informational, really, if anything, and it makes for, a comprehensive plan. I mean, one of the things, if you haven't had an opportunity, I'd encourage you to do so. Go back and look at the city's older master plans. The 2009 plan, which was referenced tonight, where this village center concept was originally kind of birthed, that was a different planning consultant firm. That master plan was a lot smaller. It lacked a lot of the illustrations, graphs, data that the master plan that, well, now Giffords, but then Birchville Arroyo developed for the city in 2014. So the plans have become more inclusive, having a lot more information, a lot more data, and I think this is just a continuation of that trend to provide that information.
Yeah, I think Scott nailed it right there, is that this is for many audiences. It's not just for those inside the city, it's for those who want to understand more about us.
Specifically on our end, though, this is perfect economic development tools, and it's going to help us figure out what's going to work best, not just only for our city, but what works well for the region. Because if we know that us and Berkeley and Ferndale and all of them are on the higher end of this spectrum, comparatively to the rest of Michigan and the rest of the area, then we know what businesses to go after, we know what's going to succeed, and we know what we can bring in and what we can bring to you all. Yeah, it's context is what it is.
I have a question. Why is Michigan and Oakland County on the plan?
Yes, I can speak to that a little bit. So in addition to kind of comparing to the other cities, we like to see how we're doing compared to the state and the county overall, because that kind of gives you like a benchmark, right? Like, if you want to know if Michigan makes a certain amount overall, is this area wealthier for Michigan? Are we, maybe less wealthy? So it just kind of helps to narrow in that context, like on a national scale when you're thinking, because somebody might look at this and say, if you were a developer from, like, let's say out of state, for example, you might look and say, oh, Lathrup Village has a higher median income than Michigan overall. So this area, it maybe has more purchasing power, or it's an area that they might look to say that it is wealthier. And it's pretty also comparable within its county region. So again, if you're a regional developer, you're in Michigan and you're like, oh, how does Lathrup Village compare to the rest of Oakland County? And it's not all just for developers, but I think it'll make, this is one metric, but I think it'll make more sense how it all ties to economic development as I go through the other data points. But does that answer your question a little more?
To put a fine point on this slide, at least for me, I'm following the through line of why it's important for us to consider our state, our county, and our major metropolitan city as compared to the data. But to throw a bone at the public comment that was made earlier, whereas I don't agree with what I think was the suggestion is there's some type of motivation behind including or excluding certain cities. My suggestion would be to truly include beyond our major city, our county, and our state, cities that share closest proximity to us. In looking at this list, a place like Royal Oak Township does not share closer proximity to us than a city like Beverly Hills, which is almost immediately adjacent, or Bingham Farms, which is certainly closer than some of these, or Birmingham. So my recommendation would be to include our closest neighbors, our major city, our county, our state, and leave it at that. Is there any more discussion about this slide? I don't want to get hung up at the beginning and miss the, okay. All right, I think we're ready to move on.
And again, like, please feel free to ask any questions. We want to be as transparent and informative as possible. Like, part of this is context, right? So there's, a lot behind these numbers that a graph just can't show. So kind of breaking that household income down, like we see the median household income sits at around 100,000, but when you look closer at the numbers, we really see that almost 20%, 17% of households in Lathrup Village make over 200,000. So that's about 1 in 5 households. And when you start to kind of break it down, you see it's a little bit, you're seeing a little bit of a skew towards that higher income level. But for the most part, it's sitting between 50,000 to 150,000 for the households. And so one thing we kind of do in tandem with comparing income data is looking at the poverty rate for a community. And what that really means and breaks down into is every year the federal government determines a federal poverty threshold for income, and that's based off of inflation and incomes and the consumer price index. How much do things cost? How much can people afford? There's a formula that goes into it, and we'd be happy to provide more information on that. But Lathrup Village, the reported poverty rate was 5.6%, and that threshold sat around $30,000 for a family of 4 and $19,000 for a family of 2. So that meant that, generally 5% of the population was sitting at or below those thresholds. When we look at that compared to Michigan, it's much lower. It's actually much lower than Oakland County. And, you look at, it's more comparable to, somewhere around Berkeley, Ferndale. It's a little higher than Huntington Woods or Pleasant Ridge. Again, we're happy to pull in some of those other comparisons. This is really just to give a snapshot, right? And again, looking at your closest large metropolitan area, that poverty rate is 30%. So you're kind of seeing like a picture of where does Lathrup Village stand in the overall regional context. Like, who could maybe afford to come do business or live here or travels here? You're kind of getting a sense of that. So then kind of moving on, yes, yeah.
I'm sorry, I wouldn't mind having the same breakdown for that slide, because when you consider the working poor, and you do have people who are working full-time and working 3 jobs and are still unable to make ends meet. So the question is, how many of these individuals are working versus, maybe not working or meet some other criteria?
I understand. Unfortunately, many seniors fall below the poverty line.
Right.
It's, damning on our society at large, but true nonetheless. And so to have some clarity about who those among us are living behind the poverty line would be interesting to me as well.
Yeah, I'm always looking at affordability, I'm sorry.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think that's just kind of a great tie-in into why we give this context. We will absolutely look into that, see if we can find more information about, working versus non-working part of the labor force, retired. I will say that generally speaking, a lot of the times census data doesn't get quite that granular, but that's not to say that DHHS, the Department of Health and Human Services, or HUD, Housing and Urban Development, might have a data set that's a little bit more granular, so we'll look into that.
I would like to put a fine point on something, back to the public comment that was made earlier. On a lot of these representations, we look like we're doing pretty darn good, which feels good. However, if we're not adequately comparing ourselves, these graphs are excluding some neighboring communities that would probably push us down the ranks on a few of these slides and make us face a different truth that perhaps may not feel as good, but perhaps may be more motivating. And so I would be interested to see in depictions like this one, communities that are very proximal to us, such as Birmingham, such as Beverly Hills, such as Franklin, such as Bingham Farms. We tend to be at the top in terms of, I guess, economic strength on a lot of these representations, but we might be inflating our egos a bit if we're not truly considering some of our closest neighbors.
Yeah, absolutely. Again, I think it may be helpful if there's a list of particular communities that the Planning Commission would like to see, just so we can ensure that, we're capturing every aspect that they want to see. And I think really looking at the region overall, like a lot of the poverty rates comparable to Lathrup Village sit around that 5% level, just as an FYI, but I don't have the data in front of me. And I do want to point out too, like, again, it's kind of about finding where, like, at what point does Lathrup Village sort of hit that in between? Where do you, in the regional context, have people who are less and people who are more, or sorry, not people, but communities, where are they falling above and below? It's not like to compare directly, just show that regional context.
Sure.
And to provide something as well, I just did a quick Google search. Birmingham's poverty rate is about 5.01%, so they are just under where we are.
Look, people have different motivations, and I don't mean to speak for the public commenter, she's not here any longer, she took off, but if part of her motivations are like ambition oriented, like if this guide should be, if this master plan we're embarking on, if the intent of that is to push the city forward economically as a place to have a business, but also as a place for residents to find home, perhaps we should be taking a good hard look at some of our more affluent neighbors who are closer proximally than some of these cities we are reviewing.
So like you would think, just for example, like you want to see more like Birmingham, Beverly Hills, Bloomfield
Franklin,
Hills.
Bingham Farms,
Bingham Farms.
Bloomfield Hills.
Okay.
I think we're closer to many of those cities than some of them depicted on these graphs.
Okay, yeah, absolutely. I think it's worth exploring like further comparisons. I mean, more data gives you guys more information to work off of, so absolutely.
Thank you.
Yeah. So then, you know, we've talked about income capacity, we've talked about poverty, but we also look at education and human capital aspects of this, like what kinds of degrees do people hold, or what kinds of skill sets or jobs do they work in. As far as Michigan goes, Oakland County and Lathrop Village generally hold higher degrees, so more so than the rest of the state overall. That teal part on the far right is bachelor's or higher degrees, so you can kind of see that pushes out further than the state, which is on the bottom. And Lathrop Village almost mirrors the county exactly in terms of education level. So then kind of moving into employment status. Now I know this graph kind of takes a minute to get your bearings, but in general, the teal on the left is your employed population. Let me see if I can get some of these on the bottom to go away. Maybe not. There we go. The teal on the left is your employed population. Unemployed is kind of that center green in the middle, and then not in the labor force is on the far right in pink. And I think it's interesting, so not in the labor force includes anybody who may be retired, living off of disability and not working, or simply choosing to stay out of the workforce. So that could be like a caretaker, somebody staying at home, or somebody who just is not searching for a job. The census does not split that group down further, but generally Lathrop Village has a higher population that's not in the labor force, and we can make some guesses as to why that is. You know, generally we would think that that means you have a higher retired population, but I can't speak with full certainty on that because that's not fully broken down. So, because as you can see, you guys are sitting at 40%. In general, all the other comparisons are 33, 23, 38 at Michigan overall. So, you know, it's just a little bit higher.
Would this data only consider of age working
So
adults?
it's the population 16 and over of
Okay.
working age, yes.
Gotcha.
Thank you for asking that. I like to clarify. And the unemployment rate, that does vary. You know, this was a snapshot from the 2023 census, which was the most recent census data at this time, but its fluctuations are normal for the region. I need to click back into. There we go. Okay, so then kind of just moving into employment, we'd like to preface this by saying that when we're talking about employment, we're looking at all of the residents who live in Lathrop Village. So this isn't necessarily people who work in Lathrop Village, this is just where and what industries residents work in, but they may work elsewhere. Now, industry can mean a lot of things. It's just, for example, you could work for a construction company and work in the construction industry, but you might be an office administrator. So it doesn't say so much about the types of job people work, just what industries the region relies on. And for the most part, the residents living in Lathrup Village rely on educational services, healthcare, and social assistance, and then professional, scientific, and management administrative industries. There are some notable numbers in manufacturing and transportation, but that's where most of your residents are working. Again, it doesn't necessarily say what kind of job they're working, just that their companies are in those industries. I think this is kind of more what we look at is occupation. This is where it's saying more about the type of job that someone has, and it can look starkly different from industry. So when you see this, we're saying that nearly 50% of residents who live in Lathrup Village work in some kind of management, business, science, or arts occupation. And just followed by that, sales and office. And, you know, kind of moving down, there's very few residents who work in like natural resources or construction occupations. And then service and transportation are similar to each other. And I'll just kind of stop there if anybody's got any questions. I know that's a little bit to absorb, but for the most part, looking at your economic profile, those are the types of jobs that residents work. Whether they work elsewhere outside of the city or inside the city, that's a different metric to look at, but it kind of gives you an idea of the industry skill set that lives here.
The thought I had today, and I don't know how germane this is to anything, but when you look at the central tendency of where people are focused in terms of their education and their employment, it's nothing that would be impacted in any way I can think of by how we develop the retail districts. I mean, the people who work in the, as we know, the people who work in the offices don't live here. The people who live here work somewhere else. They're with major companies. You know, so the economic development in terms of their lives has to do with things that are happening nationally, metro-wide. So this economic development thing isn't so much about getting income into the neighborhood as it is developing a business strip. It's like two different Lathrup villages, and this is one Lathrup village, and then there's the other one.
No, thank you for that. Well, I'm going to call it an introduction into kind of a segue into the rest of the presentation, because we do kind of see that dissonance. You know, some communities, their residents do work mostly in their community, and that's a different situation than when, like you said, there's kind of this dissonance between everybody who lives here might work elsewhere, and so you're looking at a retail base that is more for entertainment or after work or attracting people to visit Lathrup Village, as opposed to one that is that the residents are economically dependent on for employment. So I think you hit the nail on the head there, that we've kind of identified that dissonance, and it's important to address the needs that will come out of the corridors.
I mean,
for
the
that.
third dimension is economic development for the city as government, and which is enhancing revenue streams for the city. And we'd all like the city to flourish abundantly so they can do all the wonderful things we'd like the city to do for us. And that means getting every piece of land that's set aside for some economic use to be used to its fullest and highest value. That has nothing to do with getting kids educated here. It's like the third sector, making the city vibrant for income flow into the community as a community, as an organism itself. Sorry.
Oh, it's okay. That was great. Yeah. So then I'm actually going to pass it off to Eric to talk as a segue a little bit more about that economic development piece. How does this tie back to planning in Lathrup Village?
So I think Commissioner Nordmo, that was a really good thought to kind of lead us into the next part of the conversation, and that is hopefully to kind of generate some discussion amongst you as we talk about the previous master plan from 2021, as well as the changes that have occurred within the economy that we've witnessed, especially as it relates to the pandemic, from a more drastic change agent that was, and how we foresee what our current master plan says and how we envision the future going forward based on the changing economy today even in 2026. So just to give you a little bit of context or perspective from the past, we had a 2020 market study where we surveyed the community. We got 90 responses. This is back in 2009, I think it was, where the Village Center District was conjured up and incorporated into the master plan and the zoning code. The conceptual illustrations, as was made reference by Commissioner Hammond earlier, we might want to put some thought behind where we've been since 2009 as it relates to the Village Center District and the results or lack thereof that have occurred since then. And it sounds like there's an appetite from the Planning Commission that you might want to put your heads together to try and determine what the best approach would be for the Village Center District, if there's to be any changes made to it at all. Within the pamphlet or the packet that we've put together for tonight, it has reference to the existing master plan that shows the different color renderings and the diagrams that show what the intent of the Village Center District currently is. And again, if we're not seeing those results, then what's an alternative that might be acceptable to consider to start achieving some sort of development that's within the context of Lathrup Village as a whole. We've done redevelopment sites, that being the Annie Lathrup School within recent past. And then there's one particular site located at 26026 Southfield Road on the south side of town. That's a vacant property. It's also mentioned in the master plan. It can act as another discussion point, how we might want to provide some focus on that particular site. And then, of course, the House in the Woods, which is that area within the circle of, what's the street? Morningside, on the west side of the city. So just for some context, we're just moving these existing points along into the next update of the master plan. So you can advance the slide. And with the leadership of the DDA, this was established back in 1998. It is focused on the Southfield Road corridor, as well as the 11-mile and 12-mile corridors. And again, this is where we get the establishment of how the city can take advantage of economic incentives from the state, from certain incentives that exist under Austin's leadership. We're talking about the Maker's Mile concept that is new to the city. So there's a lot of different avenues that with the guidance of the DDA, the Downtown Development Authority, and the TIF area, tax increment financing, that within this boundary, there's a lot of opportunity that can be captured, which in my opinion, leads the economic development topic of the master plan going forward. And then again, the post-pandemic shift, I think, is kind of a fascinating way to kind of just dabble back into as we think about how we want to amend the master plan and think for our future. The main thing that we've witnessed or determined is the challenges with office uses and office vacancies. And I know, Commissioner Nordmo, you have mentioned in the past some really intriguing conversation regarding some of the older office spaces and how adaptive reuses might look in regards to those. So that's a conversation we can have this evening, to just think outside the box as it relates to our DDA district and the district that's been created for the Maker's Mile. So our goal is to just gather information, gather thoughts from the commission, so that as we gather thoughts and responses from the survey, that once it comes to the open house and the time thereafter, that we have a good amount of information to work from to make these updates to the master plan.
A comment.
Oh,
Kind of a
sorry.
question,
Yes,
too.
sir.
It relates to this. I had an appointment just west of Evergreen last week, and I was early, so I took a walk. And when you drive by there, you see nice, newer and more upscale office buildings than we have here. And we know that we have trouble running ours out. But you would think, okay, over there is where the business is. I was stunned to see a really nice, big, several-storied office professional building with room for like 20 different suites. It had 6 cars in the parking lot. Next door to it was a really neat-looking, currently a spa, or that's what it says, but it's a fairly large building, no cars. If it seemed, and then I was talking with my wife about, well, where do we go to see a doctor? We go to big buildings next to hospitals. It's like the world passed us by with the kind of development we have, and it's passing by this newer development over just across the border, across Evergreen. And so I hear a lot of talk about this downtown node, but really it's the whole business strip and the vacancies there that I think we have to look at as an entity. And how does that fit with what's happening in Southfield right around us, and I suppose Berkeley too. We drove through Berkeley today, and they're having some problems even there, and even though it seems to be a little richer kind of density. So I'm less concerned. I think we have one major commitment for the downtown, but that the rest of that blue strip, we've got to think differently about it. Think about the whole thing, not just that little
Absolutely.
downtown node.
Yeah, that should be well noted. And I think 2 things from response to that would be to say, I think we're going to have to take a look at parking and the parking requirements for the Southfield corridor and 12 Mile and 11 Mile to a certain extent as well, and whether or not the parking standards have a negative influence over potential redevelopments of the existing sites. And then to your point also, in some of the data that you've provided, would be to look at mixed use throughout the corridors, potential mixed use, and if it might be possible to consider residential as a component, for example, of growing the tax base. The more roofs over heads means additional spending power, which generates economic development, which touches upon all the data that Hannah had covered with the census data. So holistically, we're looking at all of that, but at this point, it's for the Planning Commission to help provide some feedback, to give us guidance as we get to the point of June and the open house, and then after that, starting to analyze the data to put into a report.
Well, we have that one vacant parcel, the total block that's vacant. And the fine print that I read about that parcel is that residential is permitted only on the second floor. It says that in one of the
In the village
documents
center,
here.
or not?
Oh, no, this is in the mixed use.
It's mixed use.
Yes.
Yeah, yeah.
And so the image that you created for us the last time around for development of that site showed yet more business space on the first floor and residential on top. Well, I wonder if that hasn't passed us by, and we need to, get that tapered down sets of housing in there to enrich the population base, so that we can then develop more intensively the commercial viability of the other office space that we do have, or that we will have in the future.
A few quick things, both connected to Commissioner Nordmo's discussion. You might remember, Commissioner Nordmo, over the course of us reviewing the plan for the Annie Lathrup School, the developer had to seek a variance because the code as written would have required residential only above the first floor. So it's likely you're picking up on the same requirement, just in a different part of town. So perhaps we should consider those requirements going forward, and if in fact the world has passed by some earlier intention, a different version of people on this commission might have had a decade or so ago. But to a greater point, Eric, your first slide describes the two redevelopment sites, or prefaces them, and the plan as currently drafted goes into detail on all three. Are you intending, as part of tonight's discussion, to talk about these redevelopment sites, or?
Not necessarily, but they're there as just reference points.
Well, I would like to discuss them for a second, because it seems to me, and I'm curious for the commission's collective opinion on this, I'm not sure that two of the three are still relevant to the plan going forward, considering we have an approved site plan for the Annie Lathrup School. And as I understand it, the house in the woods, that property was sold with permission by council a few years ago to one of the neighboring homes on that lot. So is it even worth the master plan's time to discuss, for example, the house in the woods, if it's now privately owned by a neighbor? And should these three bullet points maybe be shuffled around? I would agree that this vacant lot on the east side of Southfield Road, just north of Lincoln, is a worthwhile thing to keep in the plan, but are the other two bullets even relevant now that there's a plan approved for one and a sale conducted on the other?
I would agree with you. Those should probably be moved down the line or off the list altogether, and maybe replaced with other items if we find something else that's more prudent.
My opinion is that the prioritization is right, move the vacant lot, but I don't think we dismiss discussion around the development at Annie Lathrup School. This is a redevelopment site that hasn't been redeveloped yet, even though there's an approved site plan. Like, the reality of what it's gonna be might be different, and what we define in the master plan should influence what actually gets built. Same thing's true with the house in the woods. Yes, it's owned by a private property owner who's a neighbor of that property, but, at some point in the future, they may decide they wanna sell it to a developer to build something different on it. So again, whatever the planning commission opts to put into the master plan should influence the use of those parcels in the future.
And I just want to add one more note on what Jason said. I think he did a great job. And sometimes master plans are just a snapshot in time. So there is a site plan that's approved, but there's still other hurdles that need to occur. So keeping that site on the radar, and also making sure that it is on our master plan. So like Hannah said, developers will look at master plans of communities they are looking to invest in, and those major development sites should be highlighted. We want to make sure that they have a spotlight, especially 26026 Southfield Road. The property owner is trying to develop that site, and I've used Oakland County's Gateway mapping tool, and aerial photos going all the way back to the 60s show that site's never been developed. It's the only undeveloped site in the commercial corridor.
Yeah.
So trying to make sure that it's highlighted and showing potential use types gets people interested and gets people thinking about, okay, well, what else could it be used for? Or maybe there's something in there that is a fit for a developer, and the master plan kind of gives them that nudge and the motivation they need to follow through to call Tom and I to set up a pre-development meeting.
Do we have a relationship with the owner of that parcel?
I
We
do
know
speak
who
with
this
him from
person
time to
is?
time.
Does the owner of that parcel have strong feelings to the effect of, if only the ordinances allowed me to do this, I could develop on the land, but they're prohibiting me from
Yes.
progressing?
I believe, and I think he will definitely be a part of conversations with feedback. He has proposed, since I've been here, at least 2 site plans that could not be approved due to ordinances.
Do you remember what those what the
One
nature of
was
those site
going to
plans
be,
were?
yeah, one was gonna be a drive-through coffee, where it's one of those small, where there's no indoor seating, it's
Sure.
just drive-through.
Yeah.
And it couldn't be approved because you have to handle 15 cars on site. You cannot spill over into the roadway or the alleyway. And also, the only way they could fit it on was to have one of the drive-throughs be between the front of the building and the property line. And you cannot have a drive-through in front of a building in that part of the district.
Do you remember the other site plan?
I can't recall off the top of my head right now.
Okay. Well, I certainly think that this bullet point, the second of 3, merits kind of equal weight in the master plan as it had previously. And I'm also, based on previous comments, sold on the idea that dropping the Annie Lathrup School or the House in the Woods altogether from the plan may not make the most sense either, but is there cause for elevating other things
Right.
higher on the priority list and higher on the kind of space on the page they occupy in light of an approved plan there and the property sale there? And
agree.
if so, what would those things be?
And we have mentions in the plan of live-work space.
Yes.
And live-work space could be different from the idea of living over your store, you know? It could be that I'm a professional who needs to have public access, and if I could run it out of my house, but the neighbors would all complain and I'd be in trouble.
No, you're right.
But
and-
and it's common, and I think I may have presented my idea incorrectly in the past. I used the missing middle text as though we need to supply a kind of housing because it's missing elsewhere, and it's been correctly pointed out, we're a part of a collage of communities, and somebody else can provide that. But it really refers to a tapered down housing, tapered down housing value. I was engaged to a young woman who lived on the street that fed off of South Shore Drive in Chicago. So it was like M39 feeding into our community. Well, they had apartments all down, of course. But right behind it were what my folks would have called mansion, but it was the nice homes, the really nice homes. And I did a little visit by way of Google Earth, and those houses back there are still really nice. And the apartment, which we would call the part of the missing middle, apartments, townhouses, and lofts, they're still there. They're fine too. But then it's 50 years later, 60 years later. The homes are $500,000, 750,000, 800,000, right behind there. It's that tapered down kind of housing that provides a natural way of developing our community. And we, in our history, we've thought of that as only suitable for businesses. But if it's also suitable for row housing and for townhousing. And that's why we should seriously consider I think redevelopment of a good chunk of our business frontage in that way, same for along 12 Mile Road. People just are not lining up to rent even our nicest business spaces,
No,
let
you're-
alone the dated ones.
You're absolutely correct, Dennis, and I think you brought up a very good point when it comes to the shared workspace. It's not always living above the convenience store that you own. Berkeley, in their downtown on the west end, they have modern live workspaces, and I lived in a very similar condo after college in Ferndale, where you would drive your car into a garage, and they would go back to back, and then in the front was a commercial space that you could use. And above was where the bedroom and the kitchen were. And there was one person who did use that commercial space. It was a dentist who had one chair. And like you said, he wanted to live and work in the same space. So he would come down and in the front of that commercial space, he would have his dentist practice. And then when he was done for the day, he would go on up and go back to his living quarters. And that's something that we need to look into, because with the development next door, there are some condos, multifamily on 11 Mile, which is in the DDA district, but next door is the first major influx of residential in the DDA district. So that's during our last conversation, or 2 conversations ago with housing, we discussed that maybe the DDA is where there should be more housing. There should be more housing units brought into the DDA, and that is an open space. And we also recently had a conversation with the Neighborhood Development Department of Oakland County regarding community development block grants. And they've last year established a new process. Instead of it being given out they made them competitive. They actually competed for them instead of just getting a certain share from the county. And we talked with them about there's a possibility of public-private partnerships on redevelopment of old office spaces into multifamily housing, where we could apply for a grant to get facade improvement and give it to developers who are turning the housing or former office space into either mixed use, live work, or multifamily housing.
And turning in some of those massive amounts of parking space into housing.
I think, yeah, especially at the Gateway at Southfield and 12 Mile. I could see that happening, and we've had some great conversations about similar row housing in Birmingham that could fit in very well as a welcome to Lathrup Village.
I'd like to bring up one thing real quick, because I think, Tim, you referenced the variance that the Cerno Company had
Yeah,
made
it was
because
a-
of the residential on the first floor. The prohibition against residential on the first floor is only for the Village Center District. The MX District with that vacant parcel, that currently permitted uses are single-family, multifamily, or duplex. So
Okay,
that
two-
can be on the first floor. The only limitation is you can't have residential first floor, business above it.
Okay.
So that's already permitted.
There's some confusing language in the materials that we have on that issue.
Yeah, no, but the MX district, it is permissible, so.
Okay.
Thank you
that's
for
good
that
news.
clarification. So just like the House in the Woods currently occupies some real estate in the master plan, based on this discussion, do you suppose it's worthwhile to afford a similar amount of real estate to these ideas of redevelopment along the commercial corridor for residential purposes? Does that merit its own kind of special section as these other sections previously got?
If I could speak to that a little bit.
Sure.
I think that, yes, ultimately, if it's the desire of the Planning Commission and the community to refocus some of the economic development chapter towards how it relates to housing, that's an absolutely valid and real thing that could be done in the master plan. Now, whether it kind of gets extracted into its own chapter, I think that would remain to be seen, like how it develops. I know that right now the redevelopment sites, as we've been talking about, are sort of their own extracted chapter. So I think that could kind of come down to how specifically the Planning Commission wants to emphasize or reframe that. But in some of our other communities and other places, we have done things like that, added a section within economic development to really focus in on that.
I think we've had enough discussion on this topic that it's obvious it's front of mind for the commission. And so I would like to see that emphasized here. In what capacity, I'm not exactly sure, whether it's its own designated chapter or just an emphasized portion of this portion of the plan or the residential plan, but I do think it merits some special attention.
So on that noted, so we would definitely take that into consideration, but I also want to mention that, you know, if we do take a change of course or expand upon those, that the public might have some interest in stating their position on that too.
Sure.
So that would be the value of, you know, having an open house, that, you know, discussing that change to the redevelopment sites, if any, that the planning commission may feel one way, but by gathering information, feedback from the community, they might feel differently. So it's all,
Sometimes,
pardon me?
and sometimes the community gets excited about something that it didn't know was a possibility.
Uh-huh, exactly.
And I've had that experience too.
Yes, so just to keep an open mind that, you
Sure.
know.
And conversely, to loop back around to my original point, if the public is also confronted with redevelopment sites that appear to be stale or foregone, which I'm concerned the Annie Lathrup School and the House in the Woods property might be perceived as such, that's another thing I think we ought to get ahead of. So I know that there's, I know that we're still ongoing through the presentation, so is there
I
any
just
more?
want to add one
Please.
point. We do need to be cautious about how we position Annie Lathrup School and the House in the Woods property, because they are, I mean, all three of these properties are privately owned, right? And so there has been, and there definitely was during the discussion of site plan reviews for the Annie Lathrup School, a perception that the city should have more influence over how the property is utilized. And really, these are just examples of possible private investment opportunities, locations where private investment could take place. The Planning Commission, along with support from the City Council and how we pass our ordinance and what we put in the master plan, can kind of indicate what we would like, what we would prefer, but we have no ownership of these properties and therefore really no control over how they might be utilized. So we just have, I'm just saying we have to be
Yeah.
cautious about how we frame things so that the public doesn't come away with the perception in something like an open house that, oh, the city can decide how these properties will be used.
At the time of the last master plan update, wasn't the House in the Woods property owned by the city?
Yes.
Okay, so that in and of itself changes how this discussion about the House in the Woods should go. The House in the Woods is vacant property, right? There's no historic designation to
No.
a vacant property, right? Okay. The school has a historically designated center portion, so of course that should be properly articulated in the document as well. All right, any other discussion before we move on to other slides?
Well, okay, the general topic here is what that might be moving on to, the general topic. How would you, I may have something else to say on the topic, but I'm not sure what the larger heading is.
Well, I think we're to see as they progress through the slideshow. I'm just trying to allow them
Yeah.
the
well,
momentum to move
yeah, we
on
need
to new slides.
Well, I think that kind of wraps up my portion, and Austin and Tom are going to speak to the maker spaces, right?
Yep.
Yeah, so we're gonna pass it off to you guys.
Yeah, so during our preparation for this meeting, we thought it was a good idea because Tom and myself, along with Tracy Williams from Oakland Thrive and Mark Watts of Lathrup Village Chamber of Commerce, we are working with a consultant that was brought to us, an opportunity by the Michigan Municipal League. And this was an opportunity that was brought to us that had funding provided by the Ralph C. Wilson Jr. Foundation. So it's an opportunity that we can work to think outside the box. And Alana Pruse, who is the head consultant of Recast City, she was the chief of staff for the Environmental Protection Agency in the Obama administration. And after she left, she took her knowledge of working with communities from around the country and found that trying to build maker spaces where small-scale production can fit in with the surrounding community and have low impact, can help keep businesses or properties occupied and the vacancy rate low, while also providing opportunities for small businesses to thrive and employ those who are in the city or those who are surrounding the city. And we're in the early phases of that, and we didn't really get to pick the timing. It was an opportunity that popped up, so we took it as a benefit that we were doing our master plan at this time, so that any information we gain during the master plan process can be shared during the recast aspect and the recast efforts. That information can be shared with our planning consultant and also influence the master plan any way that it can. And right now, we are trying to think outside the box. We're trying to think of economic development tools that allow developers to invest in the community, as well as give property owners the opportunity to utilize their building to the fullest. Especially right now, on 12 Mile, right now, it's zone-only office. So that gives restricted opportunities to our property owners. And they keep asking, what else can I do with my property? Because they, right now, have office space, and for the most part, it is Class B, as you can see here, the designations, and I'm gonna hand over to Tom in a sec, but right next door, like Dennis said, there is Class A office space, an abundance of it. And the property owners that I've talked to do not wanna invest the amount of money required to attract the same businesses that are locating in Southfield into their properties, because they'll never make that money back. And there's no guarantee that that building will actually be occupied and used as an office. So we're trying to give tools to our property owners that they can utilize. And we're also trying to work with Oakland Thrive to make an ecosystem where those who want to invest in our community have resources available to them. If it's financial from local institutions or the Small Business Administration, or to give them technical assistance or guidance, because a lot of these people are very artisan. They're very good with a service or developing a product, but they don't really know the business side of it. So they need resources, they need help, they need support. They need a community that will give them the best opportunity to thrive. And we see this as an opportunity to give our property owners more use of their building and give them more opportunities that currently don't exist. So Tom, want to take it over?
Sure. So what we've seen recently, Dennis, as you mentioned earlier in this presentation, how offices in Southfield were facing high vacancy rates. And what we're finding is that that is true. Class A offices, as Austin mentioned, high vacancy. In Southfield specifically, and in the Southfield region, we're seeing 23% of Class A offices having a high, are vacant. Since we mentioned Class A, there's obviously a Class B and a Class C, and we wanted to give you guys an idea of what these classifications are, what they mean, because we're going to be talking about them a lot over the course of the next forever. So classifications of office spaces go as follows. Class A have all the amenities, all the bells and whistles are up to date, they're well positioned in metro areas, they've got up to date interior work, electrical, your heating and cooling systems, on-site parking underneath the buildings, the works. Class B, this is what we have in the city mostly. These are 10 to 30-year-old structures, smaller to mid-size. They're very few amenities. They have surface parkings. These are what you're basically going to see your smaller law firms in. And your Class C is 30 to 50 years old. They have no amenities, basic infrastructure, older building systems, probably the original building systems, to be honest with you. We don't really have those in the city, so we don't really have to worry about those. What we're going to be seeing is a lot of Class B, but because Class A has pretty high vacancy rates, that's giving us pause to figure out what are we going to do with Class B in our city. So, moving on, that gives us to our next shift in business. I had to go back a little bit and find a thesis from 2000, but it is, oddly enough, still relevant today. Devika Gopal with MIT brought up this brilliant 130-page master's thesis. Yes, I read it all. And what she found in this was that during essentially the 1950s to 1990s, we saw a boom in malls. They were coming up everywhere. And they kind of decentralized decentralized away from downtowns where a lot of businesses were, smaller businesses, and centralized them within the malls into urban areas. This basically led to long-term economic downturn in downtown businesses. But as I'm sure we all know, malls are kind of dying, and that gives downtowns an excellent opportunity to take that back. Over the course of the last 20 to 25 years, things that what we're doing now are being mimicked all over the country in downtowns everywhere. And what we're referring to this kind of effort is a reversal of retail decentralization or post-mall urban restructuring. So that kind of gets us into our new strategy. The Recast City cohort, as Austin mentioned, has opened up a lot of new channels for us with promotion of Lathrup Village and discussions with other connectors inside and outside of the city in recent weeks. Our internal discussions amongst DDA staff and the DDA board and the cohort have all kind of provided us with insight into new approaches for the business district. The DDF staff have had discussions with these external stakeholders to expand business support programs and partnerships to create an ecosystem of small-scale producers, makers, and existing businesses to thrive. I'm going to go into a lot more detail on that in a moment.
And that's one thing with the recast model, is that it's about going out and talking with those who actually have relationships with either small-scale manufacturers who are currently doing it, who may want to open up a second location or relocate, or it's also going out to those who work with them, who can provide resources. So we're at that stage right now. Tracy, Tom, and I have been reaching out to people throughout the manufacturing industry, throughout the even in Oakland Thrive's own team, there's people on who talk about commercial kitchens. We're talking with them. We're talking about anybody who's making, baking, or producing anything on site. I had a great conversation on Monday with a representative of the Michigan Manufacturing Technical Center, and she thought additive manufacturing, which is 3D printing, would be perfect in Lathrup Village. She thought that this was a community that would have low impact and would also provide it's the type of community that's looking for that type of technical manufacturing. And it has this low impact that would neighbor well with our residential districts.
Remember that comment, because I'm going to be touching up on that in about 3 seconds. So please excuse my crude drawing of the map that Givels Webster provided us earlier. I promise you I'm not a hack who steals other people's content. However, I am an artist. So one of the discussions for our new corridor designations led to a wayfinding effort within our master plan, or capital improvement projects. The yellow that you see on the top along 12 Mile, this is what we're referring to as a design district. The green all along Southfield Road, this is the Maker's Mile that we've been talking about. I'm going to quote myself from the last meeting, this is not actually 1 mile. Do not quote me on that. Projects focus is generally in the village center to start. We're going to be expanding outward over time. Yep.
Sorry, that was a question.
No, was there a question?
No.
No, okay.
We're good.
So to give you a little bit more context, remember what Austin said about being told that 3D printing would be great in this city? Well, that's what the design district was going to be. Since it's office spaces, it's larger, it's got better infrastructure, it's got better space, that's where we're going to be putting our engineering and drafting businesses, 3D printing companies, maybe 3D printing farms, and businesses that utilize CNC machinery. The Maker's Mile was going to be more for arts and crafts, maker spaces, and certain small-scale production that, honestly, I couldn't think of when I was making this. Going back to the business support from earlier, the program that we have in mind is going to work better if it has a level foundation and a holistic perspective into business support. DDA staff have identified that businesses, both new and existing, need financial support, especially the businesses that we've had now that we've been talking to and connecting with recently. They're in need of some kind of financial support to survive in the long term. We're discussing with our local financial institutions, local business advocates like Oakland Thrive, Tracy, shout out to you, and the Chamber of Commerce, as well as we've now had two meetings with our Small Business Administration representative to expand our business support network. And we're also expanding our development grants and economic development tools. As Austin mentioned, he met with the Oakland County Neighborhood and Housing Development Department to try to expand the usage of CDBG funding in the city. This is kind of a crude one, but this is a snapshot of the business support webpage on the DDA site. I wanted to highlight this because this looks pretty bad, and it is. It has not been touched since either Austin or I got here. We both kind of neglected this, admittedly. I'm going to be changing this. Once we have actual further conversations with our institutions, both our financial institutions and our various business support networks, once we've expanded everything, this is going to be fleshed out. What this essentially leads to is a proactive and corridor-based approach. The DDA is not just a downtown that's 1 or 2 or 3 blocks. This is the entirety of the business district. So we have to kind of look at these in a different way. From partnering with our business support organizations, to connecting with our local institutions that can help us recruit businesses, to leveraging our vacancies and our redevelopment ready status, we're kind of tackling an age-old problem that Lathrup Village has had with a strategy that embraces modern technology, promotes targeted redevelopment, promotes entrepreneurs, and forms long-lasting partnerships with our community and business focus groups and organizations.
And that kind of goes off of the conversation we just had in our study session with the Road Commission of Oakland County, that the way they calculate the speed limit is a metric and an equation. And even if they were to put the boulevard in, it wouldn't change the speed. So that legacy of having a 5-lane road that goes 45 miles an hour down our Main Street is not going to change. That's there, and that's a problem we have to try to overcome, and we have to think outside the box. And these are concepts that we are putting out there. These are no decisions are being made. This is just conceptual ideas that we're trying to work through and see what possibilities they could lead to.
Theoretically speaking, however, if now that we know how they're calculating everything, if we make Southfield Road a little bit denser, they might be inclined to bring down the speed limit a little bit. Even from 45 to 40 would be a massive change for our local businesses. I know realistically we want to see 35 miles an hour. Probably not going to happen, and even if it does, who's going to follow it? But denser construction along a road does lead to lower speed limits. So that is one of the intentions of a dense construction mindset. And that's it.
The types of businesses that you envision filling in what you call the design district in Maker's Mile, where are these types of businesses currently choosing to position themselves in Metro Detroit? Are there other communities that are finding success with this?
Not in Michigan right now. Knoxville is one of the larger ones. Dennis, I know you visited Knoxville recently. There was one out in Montana that received wide acclaim. I can't remember what city for the life of me, but there are examples around the country, but not a lot of examples in Michigan. Not ones that have a designated district the way that we're looking to do for ours.
But if you're going to select some place where there is additive manufacturing ongoing, it would be around Auburn Hills. It would be around where the supply chain for the auto industry is. Yeah, Joe?
Well, I was gonna say, if you're discussing CNC machinery and those types of smaller mill rights, Oak Park is completely full of those. And so, you know, that would be a good place to benchmark.
I was thinking of Oak Park too, and of course, today I ate at Mother Hansom's, which is a strip of light manufacturing businesses that have all been converted to restaurants.
The Capital Improvement Authority over there has done a fantastic job. It's a beautiful strip. It's a corridor that is not walkable, but they've found life, and it has its own character too. And Mother Handsome, Dog and Pony, it's just that area has blossomed.
So, but my point is they went the other direction. They were this small, light manufacturing on,
Their light manufacturing, though, was different than what we were looking for. They were actually welding shops and
Yeah,
things,
I know.
kind of on a heavier basis. We're not looking to do anything like that.
you know, in Knoxville, I didn't have a chance to go look at anything, but I looked it up on the website, and they just show 3 different businesses. My brother is one of these guys. He's got his own kiln and carpentry shop, and he does light manufacturing on the side of a mountain
Really?
out of town. But, I mean,
And
it
that was a
goes on
conversation.
there. There's a lot of crafts work in the South, as you probably know, but I don't see it taking over a mile of.
Well, it's not going to be
City.
every single business. We'll have enough interest to fill in vacancies, but it's not going to be all along. We're going to boot everybody out and we'll fully replace them. That's not feasible or possible. We'll get what we can with the interest that we have, and we'll make it work. And it takes a couple to start, and it'll catch.
And this is something that we've been looking into when it comes to 12 Mile. We've been looking to rezone it because it's currently just office. And I felt like this opportunity came at a perfect time because we were starting to move forward on looking at, well, what other use types would fit in for that district. And going through this, when I originally heard of this cohort, I thought, no, this isn't for us because we don't have any manufacturing zone districts in the city. But actually, the whole point is to bring in low-impact uses that are not going to be a disturbance or a nuisance to the neighbors. And so it just provides building owners another opportunity to lease their space out and keep the tax dollars here in Lathrup Village, and also to reinvest into these properties that haven't been invested in for decades. And if somebody who has a passion project where they want to make, bake, or produce something and package it and sell it in the same location, that's what we're trying to target. That's who we're trying to bring in, so that they have a home. But working with Tracy and Mark, Oakland Thrive is well positioned to help us provide the business assistance for those who may not be, who have a degree in business or have owned a business before or managed a business or budgeted one. They have the resources to help them. If they need HR support, they can provide it to them. And talking with Project Diamond, which is Oakland County's initiative to keep 3D manufacturing here in our county as the supply chain, as well as with the Michigan Technical Assistance Center and Automation Alley, they're excited. They're like, great, you guys want to bring this in? Like, we'll work with you.
Well, and the advantage, to speak on behalf of this, that we offer that Oak Park wouldn't, for example, with its abundance of light manufacturing facilities, is they could design, manufacture, and market out of the same location. It's because they are on 12 Mile or Southfield.
Yes. In a lot of these businesses that operate as a makerspace or small scale production, 20% of their sales are in the retail front on their main street, and 80% are online. So you don't have to have a huge retail sale, but there's a place that comes to my mind that's in Mount Clemens, where it's a glass blowing place, because that was one of the examples that was brought to us, is that there was a glass blowing place, I believe it was in Knoxville, that was just off the business corridor, and they faced away from the main street, but the storefront in front of them was available. So they bought it, and going through the recast effort, they were informed, like, people want to see what you're doing back there. So they took out the wall and put it in glass windows. So people can go in, look, and see people actually blowing glass, actually making something, and then seeing where they package it, and then looking and seeing that, oh, I'm right here in the store. And that engagement with that item, with that product, they have a better connection with it, because they actually saw the entire supply chain of how it came to be. And I think it's an interesting idea. We don't know exactly where it's gonna go, but we're on this journey. Today we met with our cohort, and we all talked for a little over an hour about our experiences so far meeting with, they're called the connectors, people who do know people who are small-scale producers, people who know business support, people who can just point you in another direction to talk with, continue the conversation. And it's exciting to see what other communities are doing across southeast Michigan, and also seeing that we're on a good track with them. Marysville already had an open house, which
Yeah.
I'm surprised they did that already. So it's fun.
Is ahead of the game.
Yeah, so yeah, we just want to give you guys an update on it and let you know that we are thinking of this. We're trying to think outside the box. We're trying to bring other economic development tools to our investors and property owners here in Lathrup Village, but also there's no set plan yet. We're still open-minded. We're still going through the process, and we're still also going through the updating of our master plan. And there probably will be no policy changes until the master plan is completed.
Any questions or discussions for Austin and Tom? I would like to say, I know I personally sometimes fall into what I'll call like a gap of thinking broad. We discuss often topics on the kind of scale of zone or residential this, commercial that, mixed use that, and I'm actually quite inspired by the kind of acuteness and specificity of your thinking. It's one thing to have kind of a grand vision, but to be as hyper-focused on these types of businesses and this type of use is actually quite interesting and impressive, so I appreciate the time you put into it.
What do you think
What kind
about,
of feedback are you
Niche
getting from
markets.
Yeah.
the property owners that are gonna be the targets of this
There-
potential?
There's intrigue and
Yeah.
there's interest. They're really happy that we're giving them something to do with their properties, especially, like I said, if Class A isn't going as quick as it could be, Class B isn't either. So they're suffering just as much, if not more. So it's giving them a little bit of a kick in the pants and saying, oh, something might happen in the future.
Yeah.
I might be able to do something with this. I
Yeah.
will be able to
I'm
do
really
something
curious
with
if
this.
they take that opportunity to imagine, like, well, if I invested in my property to make it more desirable to a maker, a 3D printer, or whatever, have you, like, maybe that'd be great.
It would
right?
be.
You put this investment in the building, you create like this incentive for people who could take advantage of this program to come to their property. And the early adopters, the early movers are gonna be the ones who are gonna get the biggest benefit of that.
Absolutely.
I also think it's pretty cool, if not a little bit serendipitous, that your kind of casual observations about the vacant, nicer office buildings just west of town kind of come full circle into your discussion of local property owners that are reluctant to improve their properties to be more like those ones because they've reached the same conclusion you did just by taking a walk in advance of your appointment earlier today.
You
So-
have no idea how happy it made me that someone else noticed it other than us.
And it goes back to what Eric said, that since COVID and the lockdown, people's shopping habits have changed. People's desire to go out and have a unique experience has changed. So what downtowns are trying to offer have to adapt. And Tom did a great timeline of how downtowns were kind of in favor, and then they went out of favor with the regional malls, and then now they're coming back in favor. And we're an associate member of Main Street America, and Main Street America started coming about, the concepts came together and was put together in the late 70s when downtowns were not thriving, when they were really hurting, when people were starting to go to the mall, when businesses were moving out of the downtown. And it kind of came back in the late 90s, 2000s, when people started to go back to their downtowns. Main Street America already had these concepts out. They already had communities a part of it. And you can see we formed our DDA in 1998. And that was right during the time where Main Street America was just kicking off. And trying to just think outside the box and give those who are investing their time or their property into economic development different tools and opportunities is how we're going to keep our buildings occupied and overcome the difficult challenge of our downtown not being walkable.
there's an article on Ukraine that I read this morning about drone manufacturing. It said, and it takes place in buildings that look just like apartments or ordinary community business
Yeah.
buildings.
There's a business in California that was making 3D auto parts, and they pivoted to start designing drones. And because it's 3D printing, you can design it and then produce it right in the same building. You don't have to worry about how long it's going to take for parts to come. They were able to go through so many different ideations of the idea. In 17 months, they had a product that was flying. So 3D printing can accelerate the prototyping phase. And that's something that we can have a unique niche in when it comes to the supply chain in Metro Detroit, especially part of the auto industry.
Thinking about 12 Mile Road specifically, because I drive past it all the time, assuming your ideas come to fruition, would you imagine that those properties alongside 12 Mile, which are currently zoned for office use only, would you imagine those buildings going away and new buildings erecting in their place to support these types of businesses? Or are they already buildings that are capable of supporting these types of business in their current design and structure, et cetera?
And that's the thing about a building. When it's built for a specific use. And then that use can become obsolete. But that doesn't mean the building's obsolete. So I'm all in favor of reuse of what's existing there. But there's many developers who would rather just tear down and start from greenfield. So it could be a little bit of both. I don't think it's just one.
I think a lot of the buildings would probably stay up as they are for the time being, and then possibly over time, over the course of the next decade or two, we might start seeing a shift into some redevelopment patterns if everything manages to hold the way that we're expecting and hoping it will.
This is an example of zoning language, and this is something similar if we were to go forward with it, that we would put into our zoning language when it comes to specific criteria that you all would take into consideration during the site plan review process. So right there's, when a developer wants to open up a business or develop a property, they need to, if it's a change of use, especially if it's a brand new building, they have to go through a site plan review, and that is done here at the Planning Commission. So when we add more uses to our ordinance and our zoning districts, this will probably be a special land use that has to meet certain criteria so that they're good neighbors with our residential community, because all of our commercial back up to residential. So they need to coexist, and they need to be able to not provide any type of negative externality to the residential district.
One comment I'll make on that, with making them special lane, I know I said last month that might be a good way to have control over it, but, and while I do still think that that's the case, some of the feedback we've had in the past as part of the redevelopment ready communities certification process that we initially went through was surveying developers, and one of the biggest things that was a hurdle or deterred them from investing in communities was a lengthy approval process. And so that was one of the dings that we had gotten. Potential developers thought that our process took too long, requiring, so you may want to think about streamlining, making them principal permitted uses so that it promotes and attracts those developers, because they wouldn't have to go through those extra steps. And you could achieve the same control by just making your ordinances tighter with respect to what's permissible and the safeguards that they have to have in place to protect the residential neighborhood adjacent to them. But just something to keep in mind when you're doing it, that if you draw the process out and make them jump through a bunch of extra steps, they're going to find some place that doesn't require them to do that.
Absolutely. We've had the amount of pre-development meetings we've had compared to the actual number of businesses that have opened up is very slim. And a lot of times it comes down to, well, how many steps do I have to get through so that I can actually open up my business? And a lot of times, or often, business owners or investors are like, you know what? City next door is a lot easier, it's a lot quicker, it's a lot less hurdles to get over, and it's not a pain in the butt, so I'm just gonna go there.
I mean, that happened to the city with respect to the easy storage that is in Southfield. That they initially had identified and they were under contract on a property in the city. They came to the city, and through that process, they eventually let that option lapse and located just north of 12 Miles. So, that's a prime example of a process that took too long that ultimately was a deterrent for what turned out to be a pretty, nice new building, especially considering the property that they were looking at is one that hasn't been updated in quite a long time.
But we also have to take into account, like, where they ended up establishing that business is near residential property, but much farther from residential property
Right.
than it would have been in
Correct.
our city. So the context of things like that needs to be taken into account. We need to have tighter ordinances, as you just suggested, and if we're gonna have a principal use in the ordinance to allow for businesses like that, and the ordinance needs to be strict, so that we make sure we don't inadvertently allow business to set up shop that ends up negatively impacting the residential neighbors. But it can't be so strict that nobody wants to set up a business that has to comply with those ordinances. It's a delicate balance, and that's the challenge we're gonna have when we
Absolutely.
start looking at implementing these ordinances.
And luckily, we have the premier consultant nationwide who's working with us, that we can get examples from her, and also we can run drafts past her, and also we have a great attorney in Scott. So I think we can definitely get language where it's a delicate balance, but we can get it where it does attract investment, but also doesn't overly deter it as being overly burdensome.
Was that the end of this
That's
part
it.
of the presentation?
Yeah.
Does Giffords Webster have additional slides to get through as well?
Yeah, well, we did just want to provide, so I think our next slides were naturally part of this progression of the conversation. But we did include some examples here of, more artisan manufacturing style local businesses that we've identified. There's Crispelli's Bakery in Royal Oak. They bake the bread. I mean, a lot of bakeries bake their bread fresh, but it's a little bit more of an open visual that when you walk in, you can see that bread being made. Eric had the opportunity to go to Ofima Farms and Juicery. They're a wheatgrass grower and producer, so it's actually almost an agricultural use, and they develop all of the growing into the final juice products there. And then on the far right, we have Epiphany Glass in Pontiac, Michigan. So there are some businesses doing this in isolation locally, but to Austin's point, I think locally we haven't really seen a fully fledged out district dedicated to that. But just that these places do already exist, and you may not know that they're manufacturing from the outside because they look like a storefront from the front, so. And then to add to that, though, we did have the opportunity, Jill, who many of you have met, recently went to Knoxville and was so kind to provide some of these photographs and really get a deep dive into one area that does have a dedicated makerspace district. And we just wanted to show you some examples from this is a Marriott hotel that's part of the Makerspace Exchange. So kind of going in, and you can see on the inside there's hub space for, lounging or talking or working. And then they also have this interactive part where they have things like art walls, and you can scan the QR code and be connected to several different artists. You can purchase it right there. You can have it shipped to you. So this is all integrated, and this is just in the Marriott, but there are other parts of the city that are part of this makerspace district or exchange. This is one example of a cafe that is actually, it's art on the outside, but it's a cafe on one story, and it's working in conference space in the same building on another story. We know that you have many bi-level office buildings where you never know, like splitting up those uses that could be complementary but different, it could be an opportunity. So we just wanted to take the time to kind of share some of those examples to expound upon what Austin and Tom was saying. So
Yeah, and take a look at Knoxville Maker District. It is very interesting, and their landing page is fantastic. And on their directory, they have over 40 businesses that are a part of the district.
Is that the title that it's actually developed under? It's not just, I mean, if I Googled on that language, I would.
Makerspace
right
District,
to it.
yeah. Knoxville, it will come up.
I didn't find that.
I think there was another interesting parallel that Jill had mentioned when we were discussing with her experience with the district, and that was that they have a music festival incorporated into, like, I guess, the artist aspect of the district. And so, you know, that made us immediately think of the music festival here and how you can incorporate the arts and, you know, the different festivals and activities that are a focal point of the Southfield corridor specifically. So that there's different ways to integrate, you know, these types of things into your master plan.
It's really dynamic.
That's dynamic. Yeah.
Not to divert too much, but yeah, when it comes to master plans, you can really think outside the box. In college, I got an opportunity to go to South Korea for a few weeks and got toured around economic development that was ongoing there, as well as Beijing and Hong Kong. But in South Korea, we were taken to a city that was broken up into districts based on music type. So different genres of music was the theme of the city. And that was what they thought was going to bring economic development to them. It was very interesting, very fascinating. But yeah, there's cities where all they do is grow tulips. And people come in for tourism when it comes to tulips. So there's a lot of different ways you can do your master plan. You can be really outside the box.
As someone from right by Holland, Michigan, I know the tulip time very well. It brings millions of
Yep.
people.
And I grew up in Dearborn, and Ford used to put sunflowers up, and people would come and see the sunflowers.
Is there anything else?
You know, and I think we were just planning on kind of wrapping up by, you know, bringing this full circle back around to the 2021 goal on economic development. What did you have before? Does it need to change? Do we think that there should be added elements taken away? And we think we, you know, just to kind of leave you with this over the next month and ahead of the study session next month, which will be on economic development, thinking about some of these things in deeper depth. But the previous goal did state that, you know, the city at that time, again, it's like a snapshot, was looking for thriving local businesses, an employed workforce, a convenient selection of goods and services, and a diverse tax base with a resilient economy. So obviously those are all good things, but it's more about what do we want the emphasis of the language to be. So I think we do have some interactive Menti questions if everybody here would like to dive into those. I know that we've talked about a lot, so I'll leave that to the commissioners.
Is there any motivation to? I don't think so.
Okay.
I'm seeing some reactions from the audience as well that there's looking forward to wrapping up. I
We've
think.
only been doing this for 2.5 hours,
Yeah.
guys. Come
You
on.
don't want to break our record or less.
No. We've got some councilmen.
You do have
in
a
the buil-
3-hour limitation in
right.
your rules and procedures.
Just- We've got some councilmen in the building tonight, and I would like to say, despite the fact that we may be perceived as your little brother in a few ways, I was home from the council meetings at 8:30 yesterday, so we've done some heavy lifting and some
Yeah.
some lengthy discussion that prove our importance. But I think it's probably due time to wrap up a bit. We're not missing any highly important next slide or anything like that?
No, I'd say the rest of the content is more interactive, discussionary, but I feel like a lot of the questions have been touched on, and rest assured, I think we can bring those questions to the study session to kind of just, you know, harken back to what we talked about. But as far as more content goes, it's just a discussionary piece.
Well, it sounds like there's a lot of interest in appreciation for this very most recent conversation we had about the maker spaces and other forms of incredibly light industry, I suppose. So I think there's cause for consideration to incorporate those themes much more into the master plan than they may be already represented, in addition to this adaptive reuse of previously commercial spaces to potentially residential ones as potentially new elements. So I appreciate again the effort tonight and the vision and the specificity of the vision. I really appreciate it. And to Austin's point about master plans looking different ways and cities positioning themselves differently, you gave the example of one that segregates its quadrants or whatever into music types. Cities also evolve, and sometimes they evolve very quickly, and we should keep that in mind as we're making our master plan. Even if this city has felt like it may be stuck in its commercial corridor for some time, that can turn very quickly. I mean, I was a high schooler in the 90s and early 2000s, and Royal Oak was leather and mohawks and studded belts. And then I was a young man and going to the bars, and it felt very post-collegiate and clubby and salon and restaurant driven. And now it seems very glass and metal, and there's a lot of increased emphasis on the businesses, the professional businesses that occupy that space. It's a very different place over the course of many, many decades, and this one can be too. And our commercial corridor doesn't have to be kind of stuck in this decades-long state of kind of vacancy and slight dilapidation. So thank you for your vision and dedication to a new set of ideas
I
for
don't
it.
know if this is the tip of the iceberg or whatever, but 2 of my young adult neighbors put their homes up for sale. They're moving to Detroit into condos so they won't have to do landscaping. I wonder if that's a trend. Can't make a trend out of two data points, but still, you need to.
But to that end, the city of Detroit is an entirely different place today, from my perspective at least, than it would have been a few decades ago. As a young person making a decision about where I wanted to go to college, I turned away a full ride to Wayne State because that's not a city I wanted to be in. And that is the city of Detroit faces a very different reputation and a much more positive reputation among young people today than it would have 25 years ago. So to that end, I mean, that only goes to expand upon my previous point, which is this city can change, and it can change very quickly, and it can change for the better, and it takes inspired ideas to make that happen. So I appreciate the work you've put into presenting those. So yeah. Are we comfortable moving on to our next bullet points? We're almost done. Section 8 is another opportunity for public comment. Again, you'll have 3 minutes at the microphone, and you'll have to state your name in advance of doing that. But please take the opportunity if you'd like to.
Hi, John Suzanis again. Just a quick couple of things. One, I really appreciate the conversation tonight. When I reached out to have more conversation with Giffords Webster, I was anticipating being part of sort of this part of it as a council member, as opposed to having to sort of have questions ahead of time. I would ask that maybe that be afforded, especially with Parks and Rec, which really does cross over into the residents and the city council, et cetera, on the next meeting. That's just a request. You guys can think about it. Just a couple other quick things. I think it's a great thing that you started to suggest that we bring housing and economic development together, potentially as a single chapter, or at least an overlapping one, because really all of our housing opportunities are in the corridor. There's not that much else. And then I would take that into account when you think about a Maker's Mile, et cetera, et cetera. When you talk about the neighbors, are you talking about the neighbors that currently exist, or the ones that may exist if we have a more robust, living space opportunities along the corridor, which I think is really, a great opportunity, is to bring, more of those housing opportunities, townhouses. You've been banging that drum for a long time. I really like that idea. And how does that fit? Another observation real quick is that this thing about empty A-class offices, it's not that they're sucking B-class offices into them, because one of the things, they don't really lower their prices. I mean, they lower them a little bit, but it's the way the economic model for having a tower of Class A offices, you're better off having empty spaces than lowering your prices behind a certain threshold, for tax reasons and other reasons. And because if you lower them, you have to lower it for all of your current tenants, et cetera. So I think one thing that is happening is, B spaces are empty, but they're being filled with, you know, shared workspaces potentially, or other ways to work, not in your home. And some of our spaces might lend themselves to that. And then the last thing, just to be careful, like when we talk about all the spaces around the business, you know, the central part of the city, many of the ones that you're talking about, you know, the B-class offices, they don't really have any retail frontage. So like if you're talking, like some of the opportunities you're talking about don't really exist in our thing. And so just to keep that in mind as we're sort of, how much weight do we put on this, which I think is a great thing, versus housing versus other things. And then the last thing would be, do we keep in mind, if there's more housing, is there more opportunity for more traditional kinds of businesses that would give those services, et cetera, you know, more foot traffic, or at least more drive traffic. So I like that it's holistic, and I think that's a really good maybe thing that came out of this meeting, along with all the discussion that you guys had. So congratulations. And yes,
Thank you, John.
yesterday was a great and fast meeting. I think that had something to do with Mayor Garrett being in charge last night. She likes a quick meeting. But don't look forward to all of them being that short. So,
Thank you, John. Any other public comment?
Jonathan Terra. I am so impressed with what Austin and Tom have been working on, and really appreciate it. I will say one thing, you showed us some slides toward the end of some larger grandiose spaces. We only have one of those, it's right next door, and the owner has different ideas. So when that turns out the way I expect it to turn out, bring them around, okay? I do have some criticism. It has nothing to do with this in particular. While I was sitting there in the earlier part, I attempted to, I decided, you know, I did the tree survey, but I should be answering these other surveys, and I attempted to go and answer the economic development survey, okay? And what I found is that, and I was using the link from the most recent city newsletter, and what I found is bananas. So it's SurveyMonkey telling me that this is not a good link. Okay, so that was in the most recent. Is this, and I'll have our IT director here.
I couldn't see what you were showing.
Oh, no, it's just SurveyMonkey saying, you know, this survey doesn't exist. Obviously, you've gotten some survey responses, but not through this particular newsletter. So please look into that. The other thing is, I was curious about this QR code, and the same QR code that this eventually takes you to a Giffords Webster site about the planning process, you know, that we're going through. I note that this is going through the free tier of Bitly, which means that people are harassed first by interstitial ads for a few seconds, and before they are taken to the Giffords Webster site. So you may see for a few seconds various ads of various, you know, I don't know what this stuff is. You know, please just, you know, the City of Lathrup Village is, I think, paying you well, okay? I think you can afford to upgrade to the paid tier so that there aren't ads presented to us as we try to access the information on the site. If you need some IT consulting, you got a guy here. Yeah, I know a lot about QR codes and such and short codes, and I could help you with it, but I'll bet you've got resources internally. Thank you.
Thank you, Jonathan. Any other public comment?
One more. Good evening, Tracy Williams, Bungalow Drive. Wanted to address a couple of things. Great presentation. I'm really excited about this opportunity with Recast Cities. For one, I talk to a lot of businesses every day,
And when I casually mention it about the opportunities that they're working on with Maker Spaces and the Maker's Mile Design District, there's a lot of intrigue and a lot of interest. People stop and listen because they want to learn more. I spoke with another commercial building owner in Lathrup Village today. Again, he was extremely intrigued and interested because there's an opportunity for additional business attraction for this city, which is desperately needed. So I think this just opens up new opportunities for this city for tax development, business development, economic development, and everything that comes with it. Also, I wanted to talk about survey response rate. Yes, it would be ideal to have a better response rate, 20, 30%. But when you get into percentages that high, it's usually because someone has had an actual experience and they're responding to it, and they want to respond. Typically, for something like this, we're asking people to step out of their lives and respond to something that they just probably aren't involved with at all. But when you do have a sample size of like 13, 300, like Tom mentioned, it is, you're reaching into the range of statistically significant. And that's what we're looking for, because it is fair. We do want to have a representative sample size of the community. But 300, I think, is a pretty decent goal. If we could get more, great, but 300 is a decent sample size. So that's it. Thank you.
Thank you. Any other public comment? All right, seeing none, let's move on to agenda item 9A, Site Development Report.
Thank you, Chair. We updated the site development report to identify the current status of the ongoing projects that have been brought forward to this commission. First one is Jaybirds across the street. They are currently finishing their engineering review so they can install the canopy on their patio. At 27651 Southfield Road, across the street, Middle Eats, they are well underway of their construction of expanding their dining hall into the unit to the south. Hopefully soon they will be merging the two units. Next to us, 27700 Southfield Road, they received a extension to their site plan during City Council's February 23rd meeting, and they were on the Michigan State Housing Development Authority's meeting agenda for the gap funding they're going for. They were not invited. It was a closed-door meeting. They have not heard back yet, but hopefully they will hear something soon. And then 28919 Southfield Road, we're working with the business owner to finish their engineering review so they can get their building permit and begin construction. You'll see that on here, Holbrook Auto Parts was removed. They've completed their site review process. The sign is up, the business is open, and hopefully soon, Tom and I will be going down there with Jim to do a video and give them some promotion. If you need auto parts, go to Holbrook Auto Parts.
Very good.
That's all we got today.
Thank you, Austin.
That was next door.
Yeah, no news on the school, they're waiting. At this point, no news is good news, yeah.
We'll
Say Housing Authority, ladies and gentlemen.
We'll move along to agenda item 10, Commissioner comments. Are there any updates or comments from the commission before we adjourn?
Great meeting. A
Yes.
lot of great discussions.
Very, very
Thank you.
good.
I appreciate
Very
it.
good presentation.
I agree. I would like to put on the commission's radar for perhaps our June meeting, considering we've got a full agenda, I'm sure, with Parks and Recreation at our May meeting. At the second most recent city council study session, a district manager for the Big and Tall store south of 696 on the east side of Southfield Road was there and spoke pretty emphatically about some impositions our sign ordinances are imposing on that business. And I've also heard from our mayor about a few other business owners who have criticisms, input to share about our sign ordinances. So it might be cause for reviewing our sign ordinances at an upcoming meeting for the sake of perhaps finding a way to make them more favorable to our business owners without losing the original intent behind them. Secondly, and lastly, for me at least, do we have contact information for TJ, the representative who spoke with us at the previous meeting?
Yes, yes, we do.
This is very much an aside, but there was a quick discussion about some debris left behind on the west side of Southfield Road when the hawk signals were installed. I know, because he's told me, that Mayor Cantor has complained about some unfinished business on the east side of Southfield Road as well, adjacent to the hawk signal, essentially where the sidewalks come to a corner very close to the bus stop. You step down very quickly into a ditch. And at a recent rally, I saw many people almost hurt themselves at that place. So if TJ's team could hit the other side of Southfield Road as well, there's a bit of a hazard there in the form of a trench that ought not be where it is. So
We'll
could
definitely
we
get in
ask him
touch
to-
with Road Commissioner of Oakland County to discuss that matter.
He mentioned some type of local depot or something that is supposed to be the ones fielding those concerns, and it sounds like whoever Mayor Cantor has reached out to about this perhaps is not the right depot or whatever. So if TJ could help connect us with the people that could fill in that gap, that would be handy. Any other commissioner comments? Hearing none, I'll take a motion to adjourn.
So moved.
Second.
A motion to adjourn has been made and seconded. All in favor?
Aye.
All opposed? Hearing none? Good night.